some time ago, some days ago, Zelensky for the first time mentioned the inclusion of Russia in negotiations, peace negotiations. It's quite a change, from the previous stance. The thing is now that the Russians say that neither they are willing to negotiate, but they will not relinquish any territory from Russia. That includes, of course, the Zaporizhia and Lugansk and Donetsk and Kherson oblasts, let alone Crimea. It was not even mentioned. And some of you might think that, it's because Russians really bad, they've conquered and stolen land from a sovereign country taken by force, and they have imperialistic views, some fairy tale like this. But if you think like this, please look at the facts. Okay? Look at the first negotiations that took place immediately after the Russians have crossed the Ukrainian border. Remember those? Those negotiations didn't include any of those regions. Previous demands from Russia didn't even include, they included the part that did not submit to Kiev's rule of the Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast to have special autonomy status, but not belong to Russia. That was not on the table. The Russians also said that even if they engage in peace negotiations, the hostilities will be ongoing. They will not stop them for negotiations. And then again, you might say, it's because they are evil and they want to destroy and conquer, and Vladimir Putin is a madman, and some bullshit like this, okay? Like stories for kids, the bad man and the good guys and the bad guys. The thing is, the Russians have been fooled too many times now. The Minsk agreements are a great example of this. The peace achieved, the Minsk agreements were blatantly violated. Some people claim that they were violated by both parts, but we know that they were violated mainly on behalf of Ukrainian forces, and that they only fulfilled like sort of the Minsk II agreements only to gain time to prepare for war. So peace was never a goal there. I wonder what is the counter argument for this, because this is factual. And if the Russians had really had intentions to run over Ukraine and conquer it and annex it, they could have done it in 2014 and 15. Remember that Minsk I and II accords were only made after significant victories on the battlefield on behalf of the militias. Of course, we all know they had Russian support, but there were no Russian troops there. If you insist on that they were, I insist with you that the same NATO troops were also on the Ukrainian side. So I guess that makes it a little bit even, don't you think? There are already kind of advisors and instructors on the side of Ukraine. So, and I'm not even mentioning the illegitimate government that was there at the time, from where all this began. So, the Russians are not gonna fall for that, but if they wanted, they could have. And they let Ukraine arm and get strong for 8 years, fortify their positions, train a lot of troops, really prepared for war. I think I've mentioned this in previous videos, is that at the beginning of the 22nd of February of 2022, Ukraine was more ready for war than Russia. At least on the ground level. I mean, ground troops wise. And this was clear, right? And now the Russians, in the meantime, have annexed territory. They will not relinquish. Ukraine could have avoided all this if it had followed the negotiations, early negotiations in the beginning. If it had not listened to their masters, namely Mr. Boris Johnson from England, could have avoided a lot of death, a lot of trouble that has passed already, and much more that is about to come, because someday it will have to end, right, this conflict. But when it ends, Ukraine will be not the same. I don't know what will be of it. There are a lot of theories, a lot of speculation, carving up of Ukraine by its allies with the pretext of saving it. The Poles sure want a chunk of Ukraine. The Hungarians have also Hungarian-speaking populations in the territory of Ukraine. Romanians, I think, as well. And so, like I said, a lot of this could have been avoided. And I think the only possibility of Ukraine restoring, for example, the 1991 borders, would be a complete and utter collapse of Russia. Which, I mean, you can argue otherwise, but it's not gonna happen. And you can see it on the front line. I mean, a lot of you that cheer up, cheer for Ukraine. I don't cheer for any side. I'm just saying that the government in Ukraine has done the mistakes, has brought this upon themselves, has brought this upon the Ukrainian people. This is what I'm saying. I think, like I've repeated in the past, these are two brothers fighting each other. They have a lot more in common than it seems, than the Western propaganda makes it seem, that they are very different. And somehow it's a shame for people inside of Ukraine to speak Russian. It's absurd. Ukraine is the country where Russia was born. We all know this by now because it has been mentioned a lot of times. And so, because that is not going to happen, the collapse of Russia, I don't see any way for Ukraine to restore the 1991 borders. They can choose to live peacefully beside the Russians, like in the old days, right? And if they ditch their new allies, their new masters, that it would be a possibility. But the Ukrainian people would have to realize this. They would have to be the ones who make that decision and ditch those NAZIs and those people brought up by Washington and London, and it's because even economically, I mean, you go get yourself a plane ticket, get yourself a visa, go into the territories controlled by Russia, see how people live there. Don't forget that the majority of the people, before February 22, and even after, a lot of people have fled to the side of Russia. And we saw these images when the battle of Mariupol was about to finish. We saw images, videos with huge lines of cars on the road fleeing to which side? The side of Russia. In Russia, they speak the language, they know the culture, they feel at home, they have relatives there, many of them. And again, all of this could have been avoided if it was not for the meddling of the United States in the country of Ukraine. That was what caused their demise, and ultimately it is what will prevent them from being what they were in terms of borders, and even in terms of I suspected culture, because deep wounds have been opened. Of course the Americans don't give a shit about this. The Americans laugh at this. They don't mind Ukrainians killing each other, because that's been happening a lot in this war. Don't forget that the former, even if they are Russian speaking, they were under the flag of Ukraine. They were Ukrainian citizens. Now they are Russian citizens, but they were Ukrainian citizens. A lot of them, especially from the republics of Donetsk and Luhansk, has joined the army. They make the ranks of very important and capable battalions in the front lines. And they call the other side the Ukrops. I've heard this, I've seen this with my own eyes and heard this with my own ears in loco. All of the people I met in Donetsk were former Ukrainian citizens that really didn't want to have anything with the Kiev government. Anything. Even the people I met on the bus that I had the opportunity to talk to due to the long, very long trip, when I told them that I was visiting an American person in Donetsk, the first question I get, yeah, but your friend is for Russia, za Россия. Yeah, за Россия. Okay. This was just random people in the bus. And they were aware, I remember them always keeping the Telegram channels on the look. This was, for me, was quite funny, because no old people in Portugal, or very few, use Telegram. And there, these old ladies, they had their Telegram channels, and they were keeping an eye on the attacks that the Ukrainians were doing to the Donetsk Oblast and the Lugansk Oblast, to see if any of their relatives have been wounded or killed. So that was the feeling. So yeah, even if we have, I hope we have, having said all this, I hope they sit together, but they have to be realistic. I mean, Ukraine has lost the golden opportunities for good lasting peace with Russia, and those opportunities are not coming back, and they have to. But if they don't, if they keep insisting on that narrative of the borders of 1991, etc., etc., they're going to lose more. It's going to become worse for them. And recent polls have showed that the support for the war in Ukraine is not what it used to be. I mean, they see it. They're not stupid, except for those bunch of NAZI's fanatics. But I hope that real negotiations can happen and peace can be done. Because I see the Ukrainians line faltering. I don't know what you see. Probably if you're only a very pro-Ukrainian enthusiastic, you probably only see the publication of Ukrainian videos destroying Russian hardware. That will give you the wrong impression of what's really going on the battlefield. Remember this, whenever I watch both sides videos, and whenever I see a lot of videos on more lean, no, I do not say pro-Russian, leaning more to Russia channels, a lot of these videos often show the same videos that the Ukrainians show, like destroying with drones some Russian hardware or soldiers or whatever. But they show this to prove that in that territory is under control of the Russians. If you are showing this just saying, yeah, look at this, more Russians are dead, and just glorifying this per se, without looking at what's really happening, the big picture on the ground, you will get the wrong idea. And believe me, the Russians are having the upper hand. They've been having the upper hand for some time now. Even when they had lack of troops on the front line, they always caused a lot of casualties, a lot more casualties to the Ukrainians. Of course, the Russians are suffering as well, we all know this. But they fully understand what they are standing for. They are fully aware that they are not any aggressor, invader, conqueror. You know, invader, not invader, sorry. Invader, conqueror. They are fully aware that NATO is at their doorstep. And that presents real danger. Sorry. So yeah, this was just a recap. Go check the. I cannot maybe. Okay, Dima. Some people say Dima is pro-Russian, but I don't really think so. I don't really think so. I think he's pretty neutral. Pretty correct guy. I had the chance to interview him. I think his face first appeared on my little podcast. It was not that big by that time yet. I also advise you to check the channel if you don't have much time and you want a good follow-up of the military situation. History Legends, also a great channel. And then of course check the pro-Ukrainian mappers. See the progress of the Russian troops there. It's also there. Even if it's sometimes the progress is delayed. I mean, it's not delayed. They just take a little bit more time to update their map. Sometimes not. Okay, guys. I really hope I see you on the next one. 12-hour shift awaits me. If you like the channel, if you like the videos, I mean, comment. You can comment anything, right? I never censored any comment. And I had some really unpleasant comments and people mocking things that they shouldn't really do. Like, for example, when my friend Russell, you know the story, and I had people mocking on the channel, like saying, I'm not going to repeat it, but it's really. But I leave it there. I leave it there because that's their deed. That's their dirty deed. I leave it there for everyone to see.